Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the One Winning Pod Ravens History Corner. I'm Peter, one of the 3 members of the One Winning Pod team, starting out a new segment here exclusive to our YouTube channel. Each week, I'll be looking at a topic from Ravens history that relates to a storyline for either an upcoming or just past game, or maybe the season in general. This week, we have week 1 of the 2022 season where the Baltimore Ravens will be taking on former Super Bowl 47 quarterback Joe Flacco, who obviously spent his first 11 seasons in the league in Baltimore. The upcoming matchup had me wondering how the Ravens fared in previous matchups against ex-quarterbacks. In pouring through the box scores of years past, I found at least 10 such instances where the Ravens found themselves in this situation. Some games memorable, some others not so much. Right now, we're going to look at the top 5 games in Ravens history, in my opinion, against former quarterbacks. At number 5 on this list, we're going to go to Week 5 in the 2005 season, which was Trent Dilfer's first time returning to Baltimore as a starting quarterback for an opposing team since he was let go by the Ravens after Super Bowl 35. Now, if you're listening to this, I don't think I need to remind you that the decision to not bring back Dilfer after the Super Bowl was a controversial one, and it has been well documented that Dilfer harbored a good deal of resentment after the fact. I still talk to fans today who claim they never forgave Billick for letting Dilfer go. Not the entire fan base felt this way, but there was still enough in the former camp that this matchup was met with a good deal of anticipation when it was announced that Dilfer had won the starting quarterback job for the Browns in 2005. Unfortunately for Dilfer, the very same defense that he benefited from so much during the 2000 season would make his day a nightmare in his return. On the first offensive snap for the Browns, Dilfer found himself on the ground trying to recover an errant snap, which was eventually picked up by Ray Lewis. Lewis would have another pick later on in the game as the Ravens came away with an easy 16-3 victory. At number 4 on this list, we're going to go to Week 17 in 2000. The Ravens came into this game with an 11-4 record, and I believe that they needed this win to maintain their grip on the number 4 seed in the playoffs. I'm not certain about that. I wasn't able to confirm that before recording, but regardless as to the safety of their playoff seed, this game was before the days where it was commonplace for playoff teams to rest their starters in the final week of the season. That's not to say that it didn't happen, but just not quite as often. And on this Christmas Eve game, the Ravens sent out all of their starters to face the first quarterback in Ravens history, Vinny Testaverde, now fighting for a playoff spot with the New York Jets. Now, I was 4 years old in 1996, and all I knew about sports at that time was that Cal Ripken and Michael Jordan were really good at them, and that Charlie Brown was not. So I can't say that I know Testaverde's Ravens days extremely well. But from those who did watch the games then, the common takeaway that I've heard was that Testaverde could throw for a huge number of yards, but also could give the ball over a ton as well. Both were on full display in this game as Testaverde threw 2 first-quarter touchdown passes to give the Jets a 14-0 lead. However, the second half would bring the turnover Testaverde, as the Ravens picked off Vinny 3 times, the last of which proved to be the most costly. With the Jets up and 30 seconds to go until halftime, the Jets were driving to take a 2-score lead into halftime. Unfortunately for them, Testaverde would throw a ball right into the arms of Chris McAllister, who would return the ball 98 yards for a touchdown, giving the Ravens the lead going into halftime. The Jets would never recover from this rough flipping of the game script, ultimately losing the game 34-20. Testaverde would end up throwing for 469 yards in the game, just a few shy of what was then the single-game record, but it would come in a losing effort. At number 3 on this list, we're going to Week 5 in 2007, and I'm going to be frank, I forgot that this game was against an ex-Ravens quarterback. I had completely forgotten before doing my research that in 2007, Trent Dilfer got a second crack at trying to beat the Ravens, this time in relief of rookie Alex Smith in San Francisco. And I'll be honest, while the final score of this game looks like a baseball score and the box score is unimpressive, there was actually a little bit of drama in this one. The game started out routine enough for an early to mid-2000s Ravens game. Suffocating defense from both teams led to the Ravens only being able to muster 2 field goals going into halftime, and Dilfer having about as much offensive success as he did in the first matchup. After an early second-half field goal bringing the Ravens' lead to 9-0, Dilfer finally found an offensive spark, completing a 42-yard pass while being pummeled into the turf and then throwing a 23-yard touchdown strike reminiscent of his play with Baltimore. If you're able to find the highlights of this game on YouTube, you'll see that Dilfer is absolutely fired up after this touchdown pass. This was now a game, but in a defensive slogfest this tight, even 2 points were hard for either side to come by. Dilfer would lead the 49ers into field goal range late in the fourth quarter, but the kick was missed, and Baltimore moved to 2-0 against the quarterback who started for them in Super Bowl 35. For number 2 on this list, honestly, I really would have put this game at number 1. This game was crazy and had one of the craziest endings in franchise history. However, the Ravens would go on to lose this game, so I just couldn't bring myself to put it number 1. But before we discuss this game, I'll bring some context into it. Maybe you're a diehard enough Ravens fan to remember that well-traveled former NFL backup quarterback Derek Anderson started his career out in Baltimore, but for those who don't remember this, I'll give a brief summary. In 2005, the Ravens' quarterback situation was about as bleak as it would ever be in franchise history, which is really saying something if you think about it. Kyle Boller, the presumed starter, had shown close to nothing to get fans excited for him as the future of the franchise. His backup, Anthony Wright, started one of the most exciting games in franchise history in 2003 against the Seattle Seahawks, but outside of his 4-touchdown performance in that shootout, Cordell Stewart was on the roster as well, but was 33 and 4 years removed from any of his prime days in Pittsburgh. This left the Ravens fan base desperate for anyone to look forward for a future at the quarterback position, which is why a 6th-round pick got more attention than was probably deserved. In the 6th round of the 2005 NFL Draft, the Ravens decided to take a chance on the former Oregon State quarterback. His college career had been up and down, but the highs were big, and he had arm talent, mobility, and size that you want to see in a franchise quarterback. Anderson would go on to have what I remember being a pretty decent preseason for the Ravens. Now, I can't confirm that 100% because finding records from preseason games older than 5 years is extremely difficult, but I was able to confirm that to end the 2005 preseason, Anderson led a comeback against Washington where he would win the game for the Ravens off of a 22 and 66-yard touchdown passes to depth receiver Randy Himes. But this preseason performance simply wasn't enough to convince the Ravens to hold on to Anderson. He was eventually waived and picked up by the Cleveland Browns. Anderson would not only remain on the Browns, but at the midpoint of the 2006 season, Anderson took over for a struggling Charlie Fly and maintained the starting job into 2007, where he took a 1-1 record against Baltimore into Week 8 of that season. 2007 was an injury-riddled year for the Ravens, and they limped into this game 4-4, desperate to right the ship of their season against their division rival. Anderson had cruised to an easy 27-13 victory over the Ravens earlier in the season in Cleveland, where he only needed 10 completions to score 2 touchdown passes. But this game, the Ravens' defense was better prepared and held him in check better. Despite this, the Browns still managed to claw their way to a 27-14 lead going into the fourth quarter. It was here that the Ravens' defense tightened up and the Ravens' offense caught some fire, scoring 3 field goals and 1 touchdown to take a 30-27 lead with 31 seconds to go in regulation. But this was just enough time for Anderson to drive the Browns into the very edge of veteran kicker Phil Dawson's range. What happened next is one of the strangest and most frustrating ends of regulation to a Ravens game in franchise history. Dawson's kick hooked to the left as it left his foot and was looking like it might miss just wide, but the ball banged against the inner left upright, bounced off the middle of the crossbar, and forward onto the back of the end zone. No good, the refs ruled. The Ravens had won the game. Or had they? Although the refs initially ruled that the kick was no good, not all of the officials were in agreement and huddled to discuss the call. After extensive discussion, the refs ruled that the football had touched the goalpost extension, which is just behind the crossbar, and therefore, the kick had broken the plane before bouncing out, and the kick was good. The Ravens, probably stunned from this reversal, were unable to stop Anderson in overtime, who promptly marched the Browns into field goal range for the actual game-winning field goal. Again, like I said before, you could certainly make the case that that previous game should be number 1 on this list. I'm going to go with a game that took place the next season, again against Derek Anderson, as a number 1 on this list. In 2008, the Ravens again drafted a strong-arm quarterback, this time in the first round, none other than Joe Flacco, the same player that they'll be going against to start the 2022 season. As many Ravens fans know, Flacco would fall into the starting job for the Ravens right out of the gate due to injuries to Kyle Boller and Troy Smith, and wouldn't look back. On Sunday, November 2nd, 2008, the Ravens took a 4-3 record into Cleveland, where Derek Anderson was, for now, still the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. Anderson's sweep of the Ravens in 2000 wasn't a fluke for that year in isolation. He would end up making the Pro Bowl that season and almost led the Browns to the playoffs, but 2008 was a different story. Anderson and the Browns struggled and were coming into the game 3-4, hoping for a win after starting out 1-2 in the AFC North. And they would make a game of it. The Ravens got out to a 10-0 lead to start the game, but Anderson would respond with 2 touchdown passes to the point where going into the fourth quarter, the Browns were up 27-20. but the Ravens would come charging back with a Joe Flacco touchdown pass to Derek Mason and a Matt Stover field goal, putting the Ravens up 30-27. With 3 minutes and 35 seconds to go in regulation with great field position, Anderson and the Browns offense were looking to take back the lead, but instead Anderson would be picked off by Terrell Suggs, who would return the ball 42 yards for a touchdown and seal the win for the Ravens, 37-27. So there you have it. The top 5 games in Ravens history against ex-Ravens quarterbacks to date, I should say. Overall, the Ravens to date are 8-2 in such matchups, having gone 1-0 against both Scott Mitchell and Vinny Testaverde, 2-0 against Trent Dilfer, and 4-2 against Derek Anderson. It's been a while since the Ravens were in this type of matchup. 2009 was the last matchup against Derek Anderson, but it's sure to be fun Sunday seeing the Ravens play against Flacco and hopefully coming away with a win. Now, it's possible that I missed a game, and if I did, please feel to reach out on Twitter. It was a lot of fun going through this somewhat obscure Ravens history, and if I missed something, I'd love to know what it was. That's all for this week. If you like this content, please subscribe to the channel and check out our podcast for more Ravens content throughout the season.